So, as everyone's coming in with your coffees and settling back down, I'd like to start by telling you a story. And today we're having a conference about business resilience, so I'm going to tell you a story of what I heard good business resilience looks like during COVID. So everyone's familiar with the BBC, and everyone knows how important sport is, especially in the UK and especially around football. What happened during COVID was that there was no sport, and the BBC had a huge number of developers who were dedicated to the sports portion of the website, which was one of the most popular features. Those people were facing retrenchment. What the BBC did was, instead of retrenching those people, they thought about how else they could use them, so that while they had this downtime, what else could they do? And they realized that the BBC's mission is not just to inform and to entertain, but also to educate. The BBC has this huge backlog of educational content that they're required to produce every year, but they rarely get around to it because they've got to focus so much on the sport, which human priorities, but there you go. And so what they did was they said, okay, let's move all of these people to producing the educational content that we've always been meaning to do. And what they did was they produced it on this service called BBC Bitesize. BBC Bitesize was really great during the pandemic because it helped parents who actually needed to spend a lot more time educating their kids now that they were at home. It helped them do all of the work a lot more easily. And then it also became one of the BBC's most popular services generally. It not only was popular during COVID, it's stayed popular since, and it's become one of the BBC's flagship programs. It's still in the top 100 digital services in the UK. It's ranked number 99, just above Candy Crush Saga, so it's doing pretty well. And this, to me, is a really good example of what resilience actually looks like. Not just carrying on or recovering, but actually bouncing back better. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about what the problem is with how we currently approach risks and recovery and how we approach resilience. I'm going to first of all start by talking about this problem here. Then I'm going to give you my pitch in terms of how we should formalize what we're actually doing when it comes to resilience. And finally, I'm going to give you some examples of how you could implement this tomorrow if you wanted to. Okay, so let's start with the problem. The problem is that we don't formalize resilience. We're all here talking at this conference today because we haven't really worked out what to do about resilience. It's still an interesting enough topic that we have to get together and work out what we all think about it. You've all heard about 7 definitions already of what resilience is because there's been 7 speakers so far. But all of those definitions are going to contain 2 main things. Number 1, unexpected event happens. Number 2, you not only recover, but you bounce back better in some way. You adapt and you thrive. But what we have is 2 forms of documentation to regularize this. We've got business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans to get us back on track. And we've got risk registers, which is where the actual risks and the threats get documented to the extent that they do get documented in our organizations. What the problem with this way of thinking is that we have risks on one side and opportunities on the other side. You've got the security people saying, we've got this risk, we need to address it, otherwise the world's going to end. And you've got opportunities on the other side who I'm sure that most people here have had the conversation with their economic counterparts who are just basically saying to them, or the subtext is, what do I have to give you so that you'll go away so that I can get back to my day job of actually creating economic value? I can see a lot of nodding. So you've got this kind of dichotomy here, and it's very binary, and it's how we actually operate. And as a lawyer myself, I can tell you that this is actually copying the way in which the legal industry gives advice. And as a lawyer, I feel very comfortable slagging off lawyers, but I can see that the trajectory that we're heading as an industry. We are erring on the side of caution. Someone tells us a risk, we document it, very good, well done, and then we say, oh, you better not do that because I don't want, I've got to save myself. I don't really know what you're doing, and so I'm just going to err on the side of telling you no. This is useful for us. It creates us as a gatekeeper, an additional gatekeeper, which any of those of you involved in procurement will know is a nice position to be in because you get to say no, but it's not necessarily actually good for the business. And it's certainly not good for economic opportunities that we don't even know we could realize because we're not that clued in general. Okay, so I'm just about to give you the pitch of like how I think we can address this a bit. But before I do, I'd like to ask for a show of hands. We're at a risk conference. I'd like to ask who here has a risk register in their organization. Okay, cool. Pretty much everyone. Some Sekuro sales people up the back, not doing anything. I'll talk to you later. We do, don't worry. All right, so here's the pitch. Add an opportunities column to your risk register. I'll say it again. Add an opportunities column to your risk register. Rather than having the formalization, we've got the formalization of risk sorted, and we've got the formalization of recovery sorted, but we haven't formalized resilience. And the way in which we can not only recover but to bounce back better is to recognize that when a risk occurs, if a risk actually eventuates, what are we going to do that bounces back better as opposed to just recovering from that? So I'm going to give you 3 examples of how you can actually, of real-life ways in which organizations actually did that. The first is the BBC. They had the risk of not having sports content actually realized, but they had this whole register of other tasks linked to capabilities that people could do if they couldn't work on their day jobs. They were ready enough to be able to do that because they'd done the forward planning to know what opportunities they had available to them. I'll give you another example. Let's say you're a farming company and you get hacked, and it's got something to do with identity and access management. You could use that as an opportunity to, first of all, send your staff out to go and work on, they could go audit in paper if there's anything you've always been wanting to look at, or they could go and actually work in the fields and get an understanding of what the business actually does if they're not part of that day-to-day delivery. The other thing that you could do is you could use this as an opportunity to implement that tech you've always been meaning to. You're going to spend a whole bunch of effort. Why go back to the thing that got hacked in the first place? And you could have a situation in which if you get hacked in the meantime, then you're going to implement. If you get hacked in a certain period of time, you're going to implement this when you get the chance. And if it's been too long and you haven't got hacked, then okay, you're doing all right. It's a second order priority that you can implement. I'll give you one third example that I think is actually something that everyone here could implement tomorrow. So as you'll see with Sekuro, we're affiliated with a couple of charities. Everyone here is probably affiliated with some kind of charity. You've got staff and you've got compute probably amongst all the people in this room. You could, if you organize it well enough in advance, you could donate that compute to something like AI pattern matching for the next cancer drug. You could donate that your staff to, if you organize it well enough in advance, to go and work for that charity. So these are things that you could actually do that would make you more resilient immediately. So let's go over the benefits. Senior leadership being more engaged. In order to understand what opportunities you have related to risks, you have to get people to understand what their top order priorities are, what's mission critical to the business, and then you have to know what those second order priorities are that you've always wanted to get around to, that you might not get around to till later, but that this is a nice thing to do. And what that means is that if you incorporate this into incident response planning, you're going to have a whole bunch of, the senior leadership is not going to be like, oh my God, I hate doing this 4 hours every 6 months or whatever it is. They're going to be like, well, this happened, it's awful, but at least we get to do this. And that's a much nicer way of engaging than the normal, what I need to do to get you to go away. The second one there is staff doing something valuable. So if you have a major incident and you're worried about what to do, and your staff is probably equally as worried, this gives them something valuable to do that's actually going to provide value to the business. And finally, potentially improved reputation. Imagine how much better it is if when you get hacked or an incident actually happens, you get to say, yes, we've been hacked, we're dealing with it, but also here are the opportunities that we're realizing. Okay, so what are the key takeaways? I've covered how we formalize risk and we formalize recovery, but we don't formalize resilience. I've given you one idea about how we could do that, and that's by adding an opportunities column to your risk register. In reality, to do this is going to take a whole bunch of thinking, and there's going to have to be specific thought put into what does resilience look like for your organization. But if you take one thought away from this, It's think about how can we actually formalize risk within our organization. Sorry, formalize resilience within our organization. Thank you very much.